The Senate will come to order. Mr. Majors, would you please call the roll?
Senators Aguilar, Baumgartner, Carroll, Cook, Crowder, Donovan, Garcia,
Excused?
Grantham, Guzman, Heath, Hill, Hodge, Holbert, John, Johnston, Jones, Kafalis, Kerr, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Martinez-Humanig, Merrifield, Neville, Newell, Roberts, Scheffel, Scott, Sonnenberg, Stedman, Tate, Todd, Ulibarri, Woods. Mr. President.
Here. With 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused, we have a quorum. Colleagues, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Senator Donovan.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, guests, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the journal for Tuesday, April 19th be dispensed with and the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted and the journal is approved. Committee reports.
April 19, 2016, Committee on Finance, after consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following Senate Bill 185 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. April 19, 2016, Committee on Finance, after consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following House Bill 1356 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, with the recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. April 19, 2016, Committee on Finance, after consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following House Bill 1309 be amended as follows and as so amended before the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Senate Services.
April 20th, 2016, correctly printed, Senate Bills 190, 191, 192, correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 38, correctly re-engrossed, Senate Bills 169, 173, and 176, correctly revised, House Bills 1171, 1225, 1336, 1375, correctly re-revised, House Bills 1048, 1260, 1278, 1298, 1339, correctly enrolled, Senate Bills 2780, 137, 153, 167, and 168.
Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1225, House Bill 1171, and Senate Bill 38 on third reading of bills, final passage, consent calendar.
Is there further discussion on any of the bills? Oh, yes. Mr. Majors, would you please read the titles of the bills on the consent calendar?
House Bill 1225 by Representative Perillo and Senator Tate concerning a requirement that school districts with a certain minimum number of enrolled pupils posted information online that is submitted by director candidates prior to the election. House Bill 1171 by Representatives Pedersen and Fields and Senator Woods concerning continuation of the Colorado Special Education Physical Advisory Committee. Senate Bill 38 by Senator Aguilar and Representative Young concerning measures to promote the transparency of community center boards in connection with making certain community center boards subject to performance audits undertaken by the state auditor and making all community center boards subject to the Colorado local government audit law.
Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I move House Bill 1225, House Bill 1171, and Senate Bill 38 on third reading of bills, final passage, consent calendar.
You've heard the motion. Is there further discussion on any of the bills on the third reading of bills consent calendar? Seeing none, are there any no votes on any of the bills? Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 161171.
Senator Neville will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1171. Additional no votes. With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1225 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Kerr, Senator Todd, Senator Hill, Senator Merrifield, Senator Woods, Senator Martinez-Humanic, Senator Kafalis, Senator Johnston, Senator John, with 33 ayes, 1 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1171 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Kerr, Senator Merrifield, Senator Todd, Senator John, Senator Heath, Senator Jones, with 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 38 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Guzman, Senator Newell, Senator Jones, Senator John, Senator Ulibarri, Senator Crowder, Senator Heath, Senator Todd, Senator Johnston, Senator Donovan, Senator Hill, Senator Scott, third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1375?
House Bill 1375 by Representative Art and Senators Todd and Hill concerning changes to dates for submitting reports that involve the Department of Higher Education.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. And we move House Bill 1375 on third and final reading and ask for your favorable vote.
Is there further discussion? Senator Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, colleagues, the reason I oppose this bill is at the bottom of page 2, it says that the Department of Higher Education's report concerning the development and implementation of the institution's information security program and compliance with the requirements regarding security will be now done once every 3 years instead of every year. So I'm just explaining my no vote to try to bring some clarity to the confusion I brought yesterday. So thank you.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1375 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senator Lambert, Senator Neville, Senator Woods, Senator Marble, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Lundberg, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Scott, 26 ayes, 8 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused. House Bill 1375 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Senator Kerr, Senator Merrifield, Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1336?
House Bill 1336 by Representatives Hamner and Rankin and Senator Donovan concerning the creation of a single geographic rating area for health insurers to use when establishing rates for individual health insurance plans.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1336 on third reading and final passage and ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion? Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I spoke on seconds in my opposition to this bill, and I wanted to reiterate that in a respectful fashion, I trust, but I think it's very important that we look long and hard at what policies we are putting in place concerning the costs for medical services in the state of Colorado. And as laudable as the goal is for House Bill 1336, its very title is telling, which is concerning creation of a single geographic rating area for health insurers to use when establishing rates for individual health insurance plans. It's not just a study to give facts, it's a study to yield a desired end, and that really is a cost shifting, and it's not addressing the real problem. We've got to get serious with policies that are in place at both the state and the federal level that do drive up the cost of medical care for the people of Colorado. And a study that assures those who are in the most expensive areas in the state that we're working on it and we're going to try to find some relief. Well, it's just kicking the can down the road. And I believe it's a false assurance. I do not believe this is good policy. This is the kind of policy that has gotten us in this problem in the first place. Real fundamental questions need to be asked about medical costs and medical insurance costs. And there are examples out there, like if you look at faith-based medical cost-sharing programs, the premiums, they're not called premiums, but the amounts that people contribute to that on a monthly basis are half of what medical insurance costs. And there's a very simple reason why. The mandates aren't there. That's still working within all of the medical billing systems that are so dysfunctional in our state and our nation. But that's a tiny example of how we do have solutions out there, but it's not to simply say, let's see if we can offload the high-cost areas on the lower cost, it's all extremely high-cost areas. My expectation is that this bill will pass, and I find that regrettable because it is not addressing the real issues that the people of Colorado are suffering under. During the committee hearing, we had, I believe it was 21 people speak, and they were all in favor of the bill, but their real point was, we cannot afford our medical insurance. And to that I say, I know, that's exactly the problem. We cannot afford the costs of medical care and insurance mechanisms. But it's not because there's some inordinate shifting of costs to those areas. No, they're reflecting what it costs. These rate structures are not set in place to be punitive to any one group. Unfortunately, they're punitive to all of us. Please seriously consider whether a yes vote is the appropriate step for this bill. But more importantly, let's get serious about the cost of medical care in this country, and let's not think that we can manage it from the top down. This is the problem. We do not have a competitive environment for medical costs, and therefore we don't have a realistic system for pricing the costs for medical care. And it's inevitable that it becomes out of control too high at that point.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we look at another opportunity here, and what we're asking basically is for government to solve a problem that government has actually put us into. The issues that we have here with high costs of health care have been going on for a variety of reasons, but they really dictate back down to a couple of key things: the lack of choice, the lack of competition. So we have a problem in specific areas of the state. In the rural areas, rural communities are facing higher health care costs than those in the metro urban areas. So what do we ask as a solution? We ask for more government. Now, colleagues, I would argue that government has put us into this situation to begin with. We know that the Affordable Care Act is not affordable, and it hasn't provided better care. Taking a situation where you have issues in specific areas with high rates and high premiums, and then asking those to be blended across the state of Colorado only does one thing, as my colleague from Berth had said. It shifts the problem and it shifts the burden, but it does nothing to address the issues, the underlying issues. So we have one more government study without dealing with the true issues behind the problem. As my colleague from Berth had said, I'm sure this is going to pass because it sure does feel good. And certain legislators can go back to their areas and say, yes, we're actually fighting for you. But understand what this is really going to do. Nothing in the root problem of affordable health care. Nothing in the root problem of lack of choice and lack of competition for families and for businesses out there. It does nothing in those areas. Let's be honest with that, but it sure may feel good. If you like more government and you like another government study, vote yes. I'll be voting no.
Minority Leader Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, it's no secret, nor should it even be difficult to understand the inequities that we see within the confines of this issue, this bill. I take issue with the good senator saying, quote, the most expensive area in the state. What does that mean? The most expensive area in the state. Why? Because people go there to ski? Because there's a ski industry that brings in millions and millions and millions of dollars a year from people from outside of the state, from people who don't really live there? That doesn't mean that in the most expensive area of the state, there are not people living in trailer homes in Carbondale and in other parts of the Western Slope. If we do not pass this bill, it will be a tragic disservice to our western part of this state. I urge an aye vote. This does nothing but give us an opportunity to have a discussion and to consider one of the greatest issues of our day, and that is equitable health care opportunities for all people in Colorado. even those living in the most expensive area of the state.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll make this brief. Madam Minority Leader, regarding my comments about the most expensive area, and I believe I don't want to speak for the other good senator, but when we talk about the most expensive area, we're talking about the most expensive area for health care coverage. The issue still comes down to the lack of choice, competition, and free markets. This has nothing to do with rich or poor. This has to do with inequities in a free market system because the market has been destroyed by government.
Senator Roberts.
This is a good bill. Vote yes.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1336 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senator Holbert? Senator Marble? Senator Lundberg? Senator Tate? Senator Neville? Senator Sonnenberg? Senator Woods? Senator Lundberg? Senator Hill? With 25 ayes, 9 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, House Bill 1336 is adopted. Co-sponsors: Minority Leader Guzman, Senator Heath, Senator Kafalas, Senator Aguilar, Senator Hodge, Senator Ulibarri, Senator Carroll, Senator Roberts, Senator Todd, Senator Merrifield, Senator Johnston, Senator Newell, Senator Crowder, Senator Kerr, General Orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of General Order, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of General Order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Grantham will take the chair.
Committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the titles to all the bills listed on the consent calendar?
Senate Bill 26 by Senator Woods concerning personal rights of protected persons in connection with limiting the ability of a guardian or conservator to isolate a protected person. Senate Bill 182 by Senator Lambert, Representative Young concerning technical revisions to the statutes governing the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Senate Bill 174 by Senator Sonnenberg, Representative Vehil and Corn concerning the funding of Colorado Water Conservation Board projects in connection therewith making appropriations. Senate Bill 36 by Senators Neville and John and Representatives Kraft, Albert, Slyers concerning surety requirements when a taxpayer appeals a tax bill that the state or local government claims is due. Senate Bill 155 by Senator Cadman and Representatives Garnett and Nordberg concerning a state sales and use tax exemption for historic aircraft on loan for public display.
System Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 26 and the Judiciary and Appropriations reports. I move Senate Bill 182, Senate Bill 174, and the Agriculture Committee report. I move Senate Bill 36 and the Finance Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report. And I move Senate Bill 155.
Is there any discussion on any of the committee reports? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of all the reports to all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the reports are adopted. Is there any discussion on any of the bills listed on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of all the bills on the general order second reading of bills consent calendar. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bills are adopted. Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Majors, would you please read the report?
April 20th, 2016, Mr. President, the committee holds reports that are in consideration the following tax bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 26 is amended, Senate Bill 182, Senate Bill 174 is amended, Senate Bill 36 is amended, Senate Bill 155 passed on second reading in order to engross the place on the counter for third reading and final passage.
Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
You've heard the motion. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Senate Bill 26 is amended, Senate Bill 182, Senate Bill 174 is amended, Senate Bill 36 as amended, Senate Bill 155 passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of the general order second reading of bills calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of general orders second reading of bills. Senator Grantham will take the chair.
Committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 150?
Senate Bill 150 by Senator Stedman and Representative Vesgar, concerning marriages by individuals who are parties to a civil union in connection therewith prohibiting marriages in circumstances in which one of the parties is already in a civil union with another individual, addressing the legal effect of parties to a civil union and marrying each other, clarifying the dissolution process from parties to a civil union marrying, and amending the bigamy statute to include parties to a civil union.
Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 150 be laid over until Monday, April 25th.
Motion before the body is to lay over Senate Bill 150 to April 25th. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that will be laid over to April 25th. Mr. Majors, please read the title to Senate Bill 162.
Senate Bill 162 by Senator Tate and Representatives Melton and Sides concerning access by Medicaid recipients and non-enrolled medical providers.
Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 162 be laid over till April 21st.
Motion before the body is to lay over Senate Bill 162 to April 21st. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The eye has it, and that will be laid over to April 21st. Mr. Majors, please read the Title II, Senate Bill 183.
Senate Bill 183 by Senator Sheffield and Carter and Representatives Williams and Lawrence concerning clarification of the General Assembly's intent to maintain the Public Utilities Commission's authority over basic emergency services while prohibiting the regulation of Internet Protocol-enabled services by defining the term basic emergency service in a manner that is consistent with such intent.
System Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 183 be laid over to April 21st.
Motion before the body is to lay over Senate Bill 183 to April 21st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The aye has it, and that will be laid over to April 21st. Mr. Majors, would you please read the Title II, House Bill 1101.
House Bill 1101 by Representative Young and Senator Lundberg concerning medical decisions for unrepresented patients.
System Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that House Bill 1101 be laid over to the end of the second reading calendar.
Motion before the body is to lay over House Bill 1101 to the end of the second reading calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that will be laid over to the end of the calendar. Mr. Majors, would you please read the Title II, Senate Bill 40.
Senate Bill 40 by Senator Holbert concerning changes to the requirements for owners of a licensed marijuana business.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 40 and the committee reports from Business, Labor, and Technology and Appropriations.
To the BLT committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair of Business, Labor, and Technology, I respectfully ask for a no vote on the committee report from Business, Labor, and Technology. And the reason for this is we did offer several amendments in committee, but that was back in February. Since then, the Industry, Medical Enforcement Division, and the Governor's Office have worked very cooperatively well together, and what we did in appropriations as a strike below actually clarifies some of the issues that we had. MED, Medical Enforcement Division, were uncomfortable with some of those changes made in business, and they have found a way to perfect the bill, and that you'll find in the strike below that was offered in appropriations. So again, I ask for a no vote on the committee report from Business, Labor, and Technology.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I appreciate that, and I always defer to the chairman of that committee to understand why we would vote one way or another. So I would appreciate if the chairman of that committee come down and explain what his position might be on this.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As chairman of the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee, I'm happy to answer this question from my esteemed colleague, the chairman of the Agriculture, Natural Resources Energy Committee.
It has not been determined that the chairman of the Agricultural Committee is esteemed. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure that the chairman of that committee has similar opinions of the chairman of the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee. But another good reason for saying no to this committee report is to satisfy some of the concerns that were expressed by our esteemed colleague from Littleton. And I see that she may want to speak to this, but we did have an issue of no big contracts included in that. And the negotiations that have taken place since this committee hearing in Business in February have really helped this bill come to a place where Medical Enforcement Division at the Department of Revenue with industry, and again, a shout out to the Governor's Office that we really have great cooperation between the three branches, or excuse me, at least two of the three branches, the two chambers here and the first floor, and I am extremely grateful to the leadership that the Governor's Office provided in bringing us to a better way to address the investment needs of this industry. Ask for a no vote on the Business, Labor, Technology Committee report.
The esteemed senator from Littleton, Senator Newell.
Why, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that shout out. I would also, being on the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee, would respectfully ask for a no vote. That particular committee report was very troublesome, and we had many, many, many amendments that did not help. And so what did help, though, in the meantime, was all of the work that the chair did with the governor's office and all of the stakeholders. So now I believe everybody is in a calm, good place. And now I ask you to vote no on the committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. No. The no has it, and that committee report is lost. To the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In appropriations and leading up to appropriations, we had a tremendous amount of work, again, between Medical Enforcement Division of the Department of Revenue, members of the legislature, and representatives of the industry. We have found a more elegant and workable way to allow investors to participate in this industry here in Colorado, and to allow some of the changes that as a marketing professional in my career seemed very odd to me when we are charged by the Constitution to treat this as a heavily regulated industry in Colorado, similar to alcohol. I was surprised to learn that, for instance, employees of a licensed retail or medical operation, that they may not have access to a 401k or an ESOP. And an employee stock ownership plan has the word owner in it, and that is the problem. Can these licensees legally offer those kinds of employee benefits without tripping into our restrictive definition of owner or ownership? And this bill will clarify that, yes, they can. The ownership requirements currently are 2 years residency, and those employees working at the front counter, for instance, or doing some job within the operation should be able to receive the benefits of a 401k or ESOP plan if the employer so chooses to provide those opportunities. This bill would allow it. Another thing that I thought was interesting is with a paid spokesperson. We hear this, if you turn on your radio, you'll hear paid spokespersons speaking, advertising different types of companies. And in that kind of arena, you could offer a cash payment up front, or you might go to someone who brings business in simply by adding his or her name to that endorsement, that advertisement. You could offer royalties. But we can't do that in Colorado in this industry. We could if you were a liquor store or a distributor or a distiller or brewer of alcohol, but not in this industry, because paying those royalties may trip into the definition of ownership. And this bill allows that to happen, and for these businesses to negotiate with those paid spokespersons just as a business in another heavily regulated industry. Ask for an aye vote on the Appropriations Committee report.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And colleagues, I also ask for your aye vote on the Appropriations Committee report. And just to be clear, the Appropriations report is a strike below amendment. It is the bill. The Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report was rather irrelevant because this report strikes everything and replaces it with a bill that I think is something that is an important step forward for the marijuana industry in our state. We are not the only state that is building a industry with this product, but we are ahead of the curve when it comes to many of the other states in the country. And if we want to stay there, it is important that we remove certain restrictions from the licensed businesses that inhibit their ability to attract investment and capital. We are not blowing the door wide open with this report. We are actually taking some very deliberate, very measured steps forward to allow some out-of-state investment by natural persons, to allow additional mechanisms of ownership and capital to come to this industry so that we can retain our position of being on the leading edge of legalization and having a legitimate regulated market for this product. I want to thank the sponsor and all of the folks that have worked very hard on this. This is not an easy subject matter area to navigate in, and I think the amendment that you have before you, again, takes some small but important steps forward in a very deliberate fashion, and I would encourage you to support the appropriations report, which will become the bill after we adopt it.
Is there any further discussion on the stellar and stupendous and wonderful work of the Appropriations Committee as opposed to the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have copies of a memo prepared by JBC staff that explains the fiscal impact of the bill as now currently amended. And if any of the members care to see that, I do have copies here for you. It does lower the Tabor impact in year 1 and 2, which I think was welcome news for the Appropriations Committee. But in this industry, there were a couple of things that I learned. Currently in state law, if you were a licensee in this industry, you could take a loan from someone who is out of state, and they could charge exorbitant interest on that loan. But it's very hard, if not impossible, to go to a bank or a credit union, some sort of institution, and secure a business loan for your business. It would be very hard to find out-of-state capital that doesn't want to be a loan, because it trips into the question of ownership. And that's really central in this bill. We look around the country, and states like California and Oregon are moving to embrace recreational and medical marijuana, and they are doing so without the residency requirements that Colorado adopted early on. We were the leader. I voted no on medical, and I voted no on retail. But I have also sworn to uphold a Constitution where I believe that we are charged as a legislature to treat this as a heavily regulated industry like other heavily regulated industries in our state. And I was startled to learn that an out-of-state person who has capital can make a loan to a licensee, but he or she could not invest in a company and have a more long-term interest in that company because of our ownership requirement. And if you're out of state and you want to invest in one of these companies, right now your only option would be move to Colorado and live here for 2 years. That makes it very difficult for these companies to attract investment capital when other states, say conservative Oregon, is embracing these industries without the residency requirements. But also point out that bringing money in, investment capital for these industries, does not contribute or does not legalize, enable interstate trade of the product. That product still can only be traded here within the boundaries of Colorado, and we have that here again in our Constitution. But what this bill would allow is for those out-of-state investors to be able to invest, to be vetted by the Department of Revenue, Medical Enforcement Division. They have confidence now, as the bill is amended, that they can keep up with that demand, know who these people are, and hold the people who are licensees, the owners here in Colorado, hold them accountable should something go wrong. And I think that's the elegance, the beauty of Senate Bill 40 as it currently exists, and ask for an aye vote.
Senator Heath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of Business, Labor, Technology Committee, we really struggled with this one, as the chair just alluded to, and I am really pleased, and I was not a part of these negotiations, but having had a chance now to study the bill as it came out of approach, the strike below, this is so much better than where we started. And I too was not in favor of putting all this industry in, but we've created an industry and it's got to work. And this certainly helps, I think, the industry, and as a result, I think will help the state. So thank you very much for your efforts, and I will be a strong supporter and vote yes on this bill.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 40? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 40. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 40 is adopted. Mr. Majors, please read the title to Senate Bill 130.
Senate Bill 130 by Senator Scott concerning the methods used by the Department of Revenue to collect consumer use tax.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 130 is actually a very simple cleanup bill that addresses what
I'd like to
appeared...
move the bill, Senator Scott.
I'm very sorry. I move Senate Bill 130 and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for correcting me. Appropriations Committee report is as follows. This will require an appropriation of about $48,000 for paperwork, maintenance, and support from Department of Revenue, and it was approved in the committee.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, I rise to respectfully request a no vote on the Appropriations Committee report for Senate Bill 130. And I want to call your attention to the fiscal note, because I think this fiscal note tells the story of why you should actually not only defeat the Appropriations report, but defeat the bill. In the Appropriations Committee, we were required to appropriate about $49,000 of general fund support to the Department of Revenue for the purpose of this bill. So just stated plainly, for the record, this bill to implement will cost the taxpayers of Colorado $49,000 in expenditures to implement and put into effect what the bill requires. But that's not all, colleagues, because if you'll notice your fiscal note, it's not just going to cost us $49,000 in the growth of government, $49,000 worth of additional work at the Department of Revenue, $49,000 worth of bureaucracy and changes to put this into effect. It's then going to cost us $900,000 in the current fiscal year in lost revenue, and twice that much in future years, because the current year is only a 6-month impact. It'll then cost us $1.8, close to $1.9 million in lost revenue in the upcoming fiscal year. And so what a bargain for the taxpayers of Colorado. Just think about that. They get $49,000 worth of more government at the Department of Revenue in exchange for $1.8 million less of revenue to support the more government the bill calls for. This is not a bargain, folks. This actually is something that I think is not policy that we should be engaging in. I'm speaking now just to the appropriations report. I would encourage a no vote, but if it's adopted, I'd like to speak to the substance of the bill. But for now, I encourage a no vote.
Senator Scott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I will point out that, yes, it does. I did mention that in my opening remarks, have a fiscal note. Dependent on what they need to do, they will spend up to $48,000. Just so we're clear on that. The thing that my colleagues seem to try to do with this bill is not talk about what it really does, but what they think it does. What this bill does not deal with the tax. The tax is the tax. It's been there since 1937. What we're talking about is the ability to collect the tax. Back in the days of the dirty dozen, as I have been told, the bill then was flawed because what they did is they required the shipper of a product from out of state to tell you how much tax you owed. We have absolutely no authority across state lines. So we're going to go to eBay and arrest and extradite the president of eBay and make them come back and answer for that in the state of Colorado? I don't think so. What we're trying to do here, and I think it's a valid point to discuss, is protect the taxpayer. That's all we're trying to do here. There's some lines on this tax form, if you are willing and want to look this up on your iPads. Lines 29 through 32 are very confusing, number one. Number two, it just tells people to put down a number. The Department of Revenue actually testified in the committee hearing, oh, it's okay if they just put a 0 there, we won't prosecute them. If you just put a 0 there, we won't prosecute you. Now, I'd like to see how much they're willing to do that on all tax returns. And if you sign this and you did buy something and you forgot you bought it, and eBay doesn't send you that receipt because they can't do it or won't do it, you've now committed a Class 5 felony by signing this form. We're just trying to protect the taxpayer. That's all we're doing. The tax is the tax. People get that. And if they want to report it, we found out there were 1,300 people out of 5 million that have filled that out. That's a whopping big number. So basically, we've made 4 million other people tax cheats. Is that a good thing to do to the taxpayers of the state of Colorado? I don't think so. And by passing this bill, all we're doing is eliminating the lines. The tax is the tax. It stays where it belongs. We're just making sure our constituents don't become tax frauds because they make a simple mistake.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The aye has it, and that report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, colleagues, I will now ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 130. I don't think this is a wise use of $49,000 of taxpayer resource, and I want to take issue with the assertion that what we're doing is protecting the taxpayer, because I think what we're doing with this bill is protecting the tax evader. And that's really the issue here. We are going to make it more difficult for people to remit a tax that the sponsor says the tax is the tax, and if they owe the tax, they owe the tax. The tax is owed, and the question is, should we facilitate the collection of that tax with having a place on the income tax return for people to put down the fact that they owe this tax? Or should we take those lines off of the income tax return at a cost of $49,000 to state taxpayers so that tax evaders don't have a reminder or an opportunity to remit their tax? This is facilitating tax evasion. It's growing government, costing taxpayers more money in order to let tax evaders get away with paying less money, so that ultimately the general fund is going to lose close to $1.9 million in the upcoming fiscal year and over $2 million a year in years thereafter. This is no bargain, folks. This is $49,000 for more government to impair the ability of government to assist taxpayers in paying the taxes they owe. If you want to protect tax evaders, this is the bill for you, but I would respectfully suggest that we should defeat it here this morning.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the suggestion that this is no bargain, I guess I'm confused. We're talking about perjury. How can we simplify this and say it's not a bargain for who? For this, oh, that's right, I'm sorry. If we collect a lot of tax, that's for the state of Colorado. That's a wonderful thing. But we're trying to protect people from perjury. That's a Class 5 felony. That's bad stuff. It's very simple. I'm not sure why we're trying to convolute the issue into something it's not.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, there's another issue here. This doesn't just affect the state's coffers, it affects local government coffers. And if you look at your fiscal note on page 3, it talks about cut to the Regional Transportation District in 2 years at $430,000. For those of us who were promised commuter rail to Longmont through Boulder, Louisville, Westminster, Broomfield, that's not good. They promised us that. They're saying now it's 2042. We're trying to find a way to accelerate that. This bill would undermine our local government's efforts along the US 36 corridor. Again, Westminster, Broomfield, Louisville, Boulder, Longmont, to get that done. And our constituents are paying for this now, and we should not have another roadblock put in the way of commuter rail to Longmont.
Senator Heath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the subject of Amazon came up, and yes, I was around then in 2010, and I would commend Amazon because they finally saw the light and are actually collecting the sales tax now. So if you buy from Amazon, sales tax is automatically added to your bill, and the state then is now being compensated. But let's go back to why I carried that bill and why this bill is the wrong way to go. Use tax was put into effect, as the bill sponsor said, way back in, I think, 1937, and there was a reason for it. And the reason for it was the same reason that we did the Amazon bill, the so-called Amazon bill, and that was to protect our local merchants. Main Street, our local bookstores, our local hardware stores, you name it, have to compete. And the position we put them in, particularly now through the dramatic growth in interstate and internet sales, has put them in a distinct disadvantage against an out-of-state retailer who settles into this state and doesn't collect a sales tax. And the difference in that can be up to pushing 10% in some areas. And let's understand, sales tax, the direct beneficiary of sales tax in most instances is local government. Municipal government, schools, local government is the beneficiary of sales tax. And when we place our local merchants at a competitive disadvantage because of the failure of taxing interstate and internet sales, we are hurting the very people that we're trying to help. And that is to allow our local merchants on Main Street throughout this state to compete. And we all know, with the growth of internet sales, we have put them in a very difficult position. Just look at how many bookstores have gone out of existence because they can't compete. By the way, that Amazon bill that the sponsor of this bill referred to was just upheld. What we did with it, requiring merchants, out-of-state merchants, to report their sales, was just upheld by the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And basically is part of the model for the rest of the country. Hopefully the federal government will finally step in and clarify exactly what we need to do, and that is that everybody should be collecting sales tax. I think that will eventually happen. But in the meantime, we can't make this more difficult and worse by doing what this bill says. Because by taking this off, we are in effect excusing people who should know better to report this on their tax form. I think this is just the opposite way we should be going. It further makes it more difficult for our local vendors, commercial businesses in this state to compete. We don't want to do anything that makes them and puts them in a non-competitive position. That's why we passed the Amazon bill going way back to 2010. That was why we did it. So please, let's not travel down this road and make it more difficult. By taking this off, we're basically saying, you don't have to do this. We're giving them basically permission, if you will, if they don't know. This at least puts them on notice that, hey, you've got to, there is a use tax, and there is a use tax for a reason. Let's not give them an excuse not to know, which this, I believe, does. I would ask you to vote no.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to spend a minute talking about what actually is happening here. Because if you're not in the Finance Committee or you're not one of the old folks like me who was around when this issue was first discussed, it might be confusing. Because this was surprising to me. This is the first time in my service here I've seen a bill whose purpose is to make it more difficult for law-abiding citizens of Colorado to actually follow the law. Because to be clear, that's what this bill does. So right now, if you buy something from out of state, you drive to Wyoming and you buy a car there and you come back to Colorado, you owe use tax on that purchase. Right now, if you get online and you buy a book from Wyoming and it is shipped to you, you owe use tax on that purchase. What the legislation did that was just upheld by the court is said there are now two ways you can handle that. Way one, which is what Amazon is now doing now to their credit. Thank you, Amazon, for being a partner in this. is when you go online and buy that book from Amazon, they will, at the point of sale, just like any local retailer will do, collect the sales tax from you, remit it to the state of Colorado, you are all done. Any online vendor that wants to make life easy for you and for them does that, and it's over. If they don't want to do that, what they are now required to do by law under our bill, upheld by the circuit court, is they are required to send you a notice of what the use tax is that you owe. So if they don't want to collect it and remit it, what they're required to do is to send you a form that says, Raleigh Heath, you bought $175 of books. That means under your state sales tax, you owe $7.42 in sales tax. You get that number, and you now owe it by law. So if that company is not going to remit it themselves, what you have to do is take that receipt and submit it onto your tax form, this form right here. What the Department of Revenue did, because this law exists, is said, you know what? We ought to make it easier for folks who pay that tax to have a line on the form where they know where to put it. The same way you have a line on the form for your qualifying charitable contributions, or your spouse pension annuity incomes, or your para subtractions from 1984 to 1986. Those are all lines on the form. Here is all this bill is going to do. All this bill is going to do is to eliminate, to make illegal, the inclusion of that line on this tax form for you to know where to put it. Do you not owe the use tax anymore? Oh, no, you still owe it. Do you not have to pay it anymore? No, you still have to pay it. Are you not still committing tax fraud if you don't pay it? No, you're still committing tax fraud. We're just going to make it much harder for you to comply with the law that is still in existence. As I said on committee, if you don't like the use tax, the more obvious thing to do would be run a bill to eliminate the use tax. Because that would be direct, and that would be honest, and that would be easy for consumers to comply with. What you've done instead is leave that tax on the books and intentionally make it harder for law-abiding citizens to pay it. I can't understand any reason why that's helpful. And if the question is, this is a complicated tax to compute, my question is it more complicated than the para DSPRS subtraction for contributions made from 1984 to 1986? Because you have to know that number exactly to the dime on this form. And if you don't, you're also liable for the same tax fraud like every other one of the items on this list. If you want to simplify that tax structure, great, let's bring that bill. If you're not going to eliminate the use tax, certainly don't make it more complicated for law-abiding citizens who are trying to do what they ought to do. I'd ask for a no vote on 130.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 130. And my argument would start here at the top of the Colorado Individual Income Tax Form for 2015. Income tax. And the prior speaker did point out this list here of different calculations that we all need to do. And the problem that I have with this is calculating the use tax, not income tax, but use tax on this form subjects the taxpayer to, as the bill sponsor pointed out, a felony. So I went through, my wife and I buy things online. She buys a lot of the Keurig coffee supplies online. We came up with an estimate of what we spent, but I also helped my 21-year-old son prepare his tax return, and I asked him, well, how much did you spend online? And the prior speaker mentioned the requirement now that the online providers send a statement. If they can't calculate and collect the tax at the point of sale, they send a statement. Well, I ask you, Mr. Chair, or anyone listening, if you've purchased things, say, through Amazon or eBay, and some individual in another state was the provider of that, how many of those statements did you receive leading up to April 15th and the tax filing deadline? I didn't receive any. Now, I did buy things online, and my son bought things online where the tax was collected at the point of sale. But for those individual sellers, an eBay seller out there somewhere in another state, if you bought anything online through eBay or Amazon or any of those providers, how many of those statements did you receive before April 15th? And for my son and I, in helping him prepare his tax return, and my wife and I in preparing ours, the answer was 0. I didn't receive any of those. So what we did is we went through and looked at every purchase and totaled up the total and put the number on here. And I believe the statement here that the best of my knowledge and belief, that statement, the return is true, correct, and complete. But the problem here is that if a taxpayer doesn't do that due diligence in reporting the use tax and in recognizing that, at least in my experience, none of those statements arrived for any member of my family from retailers admittedly much smaller than Amazon. And yes, thank you, Amazon, for providing that information through your system. But none of those other small providers. I bought some toner cartridges from, I think, a person in Michigan or Ohio or something like that. I didn't get any sort of statement from that, but I know what I paid, so I did my due diligence to come back and report that. But without those documents, how is a family, a head of household, how is a head of household supposed to sign this form and know for sure that every dollar is accounted for when there is no accounting for that for these outside the state retailers? What I would propose is that we take this off of the income tax form and provide some other form for the taxpayers of Colorado to estimate, to report use tax, and not have it part of the income tax form and subject them, I think the bill sponsor said, subject them to a Class 5 felony. That seems a bit extreme when we're counting on reports from out-of-state retailers that are not being provided. I ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 130.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this bill as well. I'm not exactly sure how to plug this in, but it reminds me of a story when some religious zealots brought somebody before Jesus and they were about to stone this person. And he looked at them carefully and said, well, he who is without sin cast the first stone. And no stones were tossed. And when I look at the requirements that are placed on a document that is now 4 pages in length, I've been filling out Colorado income tax returns since, I think it was like 1964, 65, somewhere in there. And used to be that it was a fairly straightforward, simple document. Now it's getting to the point where it does require a whole lot of expertise and care. I believe this bill really does address some issues that are appropriate. Vote yes.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 130? Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One additional comment. I agree with the instinct from some of the folks who support this bill that the tax code is overly complicated and should be simplified. I think there are, in fact, some good conversations I've had with members of the Finance Committee who I think have very compelling ideas on what that might look like. This is not that proposal. And the challenge is this does not solve that problem. It actually makes it worse, because what remains in this book is the laws for what taxes you're required to pay and the consequences for not paying them. Everyone still has the same potential exposure to charges under 3926-204-5A, whether they have this form or not. And so the question is, and I think the Senator from Douglas County's point about, we have always lived under this to the best of my knowledge and belief standard, which is if you missed a $1.27 receipt from one of your purchases that you forgot about somewhere in the drawer, that is not tax fraud. That is, to the best of your knowledge and your belief, you represented what you thought to be your charges, and if they find you to be wrong, they will let you know. And it turns out. So I don't think that we are putting people in a bad spot by giving them more information and more ease of use. for how to file this. I think we're putting them in a bad spot by asking them to be, by denying them the access to the simplest form to compute the charges that they know they owe and they are willing to pay. I'll say this is not de minimis. This is $2.5 million of revenue a year that people owe and they're willing to pay, and the Department of Revenue is trying to make common sense steps to make it easier for them to pay. If we want to do a dramatic simplification of the tax code, let's have that. As long as we have the tax code we have, let's not make it harder for people to file their taxes and easier for them to unwillingly fall into tax fraud. I think that's not in our best interest. I'd ask for a no.
Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm enjoying this debate. This is lively and good stuff. I do enjoy it. I'm trying to understand, I guess, a little bit of how we came up with $2 million in revenue when nobody has any clue how much anybody has spent online anywhere in the world. It's an amazing number that we've flying up. I mean, it's pie in the sky. It's great, but I understand why somebody would use that as an argument. You know, this is so simple, and we're trying to make this so complicated. All we're saying is this year, the Department of Revenue put these 4 or 5 lines on the tax return. They weren't there last year. They weren't there the year before, well into when the other bills were passed. We're just saying remove those lines. Now, the Department of Revenue has all the ability in the world to promulgate a rule, as they did here, change the tax form to 2016, and put one simple line on there, if that's what they want to do. Right now, I realize that people are mesmerized in the morning when they wake up and they pick up their newspaper and their tax forms, and they begin to read the news. And this is so simple stuff, as my colleagues have pointed out, to be so simple, and we can't take this away from people. It's just a terrible thing to do. And I know when I'd get up in the morning, the first thing I'd look at is use tax. Enter the total purchase of which sales or use tax was not previously paid. That's clear as mud. Multiply that by 2.9. Okay. Enter the SDCU code for any applicable special districts. What in the heck is that? Think about the typical taxpayer who's reading the Denver Post in one hand and their tax forms in the other every morning of the year, and they're going to figure this thing out? This is a recipe for disaster for a whole lot of folks. It's very simple. Get the lines off of there. Think of a better way to do this. If we have to run a bill next year, I'm more than happy to work with my colleagues to come up with something that makes more sense. This is not about the tax. This is about how you collect the tax, and we keep people from defrauding, if you will, or making a simple mistake on their tax return, which even the Department of Revenue in the hearing, in the committee hearing, go back and listen to it, told us in the committee room, if you just put 0 down, don't worry about it. We're not going to enforce that. We're not going to enforce that. You know what? I'd rather just put 0 at the bottom of the whole dang tax form, since they're not going to enforce anything. Are they not going to enforce that? Why don't we all try that, sign the form, send it in, and let's see what happens. We could make a bipartisan move here today. We'll put 0s on our tax reform, send them to the Department of Revenue, and they're not going to enforce it. If you believe that for a minute, I got a bridge for sale for it. Now, for all the folks, all 3 of them that are listening out there in Channel 165 land, I want you to do this. Put a 0 on this form. I want you to put a 0 on this form. Now, if the Department of Revenue comes after you, whoever you are, I want you to go back and look at who voted no on Senate Bill 130 and ask them to donate to your defense fund. I again ask for a yes vote on Senate Bill 130.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 130? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 130. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 130 is adopted. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title of the Senate Bill 117?
Senate Bill 117 by Senator Sonnenberg concerning a limitation on state agencies' authority to impose a fine.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 117 and the Appropriations Committee report and the Finance Committee report.
To the Finance Committee report, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finance Committee report just clarified some of the items that were already in the bill and tried to make it a little easier to understand. I just ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Finance Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appropriations Committee report did what it did and set aside some money to deal with the administration of this program. Asked for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what this bill does is very simply quits having us balance the budget on the backs of people by using a hammer to levy fines against the citizens and the businesses of Colorado. What we have seen over the past couple of years is an increase in government's heavy-handedness on communities, on people. And if we truly want to be a government that is helpful, what this bill does is says, look, let's fix the problem. If there is a problem with regard to water quality or air quality or a problem with regard to your filing of papers, let's figure out how to fix that so we can move more efficiently in the future. A simple example. Last year, the town of Burlington, trying to figure out what they can do to increase their water quality, was fined $1 million. I understand this town, this community of about 4,000 people, has a total annual budget of just over $3 million. In the infinite wisdom of the Department of Public Health and Environment, they decided that since their largest fine up to that date was $250,000, that they would, or 200,000, I can't remember the number, but they would quadruple that to punish the town of Burlington. It's not the way we should work. If we truly are from the government and want to help, let's help. Let's help them instead of fining them and balance our budget on the backs of those folks. Let's find ways to utilize that money to help them solve the problem so they have clean water. I ask for a yes vote so these small communities don't have to run scared from government and can expect help from us.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 117. I'll start, there are a couple of things on this bill, but I'll start with the fiscal note. And if we're talking about using heavy hammers, and if there is a single issue, let's pretend for a moment that there was something wrong with a single incident and too big of a fine in a single incident. Talk about a heavy hammer in overreacting to a single incident. I'm looking at the fiscal note in the Appropriations Committee report that we just passed. Puts a little over $1 million against a state budget that we were recently talking about a state budget that our esteemed JBC members worked long and hard on, came to this body, was in the other chamber, and that budget, as required by state constitution, was balanced. Every time, every session that we meet, we're required to pass a balanced budget. So we just passed an Appropriations Committee report on this bill, and if this bill moves forward, there is a over $1 million expenditure that throws that budget out of balance. But that actually is still a drop in the bucket compared to the big hit to our state budget of over $40 million. Over $40 million hit. What did we do with our state budget? Who is going to go back and balance off this now over $41 million imbalance? Talk about the heavy hammer on citizens of Colorado. That's over $41 million, which I think we all know the only place to get that kind of money out of the state budget is going to be K-12 education. And very recently, I've heard a lot of conversation here at this well about how hard the legislature worked, how hard the Joint Budget Committee worked to make sure that our K-12 budget, our K-12 portion of our budget was not impacted. That the negative factor actually was reduced this year, down to $831 million. Well, with the passage of Senate Bill 117, we're not going to be able to make a reduction to the negative factor. In fact, it is going to have to grow. By my calculations, the negative factor would have to grow to $872 million plus. That is balancing the budget on the backs of our students, where we've already had the hard work done. The Joint Budget Committee has worked hard to come to a balanced budget, and then we bring a bill that knocks us out of balance by over $41 million. So, of course, the argument then is, well, that's revenue. We're talking about the city of Burlington. What did the city of Burlington do to deserve this? So the city of Burlington contacted CDPHE in 2014. This is the first time the city of Burlington had contacted CDPHE, that they were expecting to exceed some of their, to violate some of their water quality tests that were done, specifically around nitrate. And they, in their report, they indicated that these violations were done in 2014, that's when the nitrate levels were too high and that the tests had been violated. When the city of Burlington informed CDPHE, which you figure, well, that's good. You know, they knew they were going to have violations. They made the report. But at no time did they mention anything about previous violations, previous times, which actually had been happening not for months, but for years. The city of Burlington knew about repeated violations where nitrate levels exceeded the standard. The water quality in the city of Burlington was not where it should be. So what is nitrate? If we had a glass of water right here that we knew exceeded the nitrate level, if you brought me a cup of water right now, if I was thirsty, and I knew it exceeded the standard of nitrates, would I drink it? Absolutely. Because nitrates, a high level of nitrates doesn't impact an adult male. Why do we have standards on nitrate levels in water? There are two types of people that are severely impacted by high nitrate levels. Pregnant women and infants. So let me make this clear. In 2014, the city of Burlington announced that their water quality was going to exceed some nitrate levels, some nitrate standards. They did not announce that the city and the water supply had been exceeding the nitrate levels for years. And high nitrate level is extremely, extremely toxic to pregnant women and newborn infants. If intentionally not reporting your water quality violations for years does not qualify as a reason for our Department of Public Health and Environment to come in and try to make sure that this blatant violation of health standards is fixed, I don't know what is. Also, we heard about $1 million penalty. That was the initial penalty calculation based on 2,109 total violations, stretching from 2009 to 2014. Over 5 years, half a decade of unreported violations, 235 violations of health-based nitrate limit, 705 violations for failing to notify the public, 470 violations for failing to notify CDPHE, 443 violations for failing to report sample results, 235 violations for failing to collect additional samples, 16 violations for failing to sample at proper frequencies, 5 violations for providing inadequate information in required annual reports. Initial penalty calculation, $988,416.50. That's the calculation prior to considering Burlington's ability to pay. Final penalty that was negotiated was about half of that, $453,000. $150,000 cash payment forbearance on the remaining amount if Burlington meets specified compliance requirements. So you heard here at the well that this was $1 million penalty on the city of Burlington. Where the fact of the matter is, this was reduced to a $150,000 cash payment if Burlington actually fixed the problem. There's not $1 million penalty hanging over the head of Burlington. Even the final penalty was cut in half, and then the cash payment if they actually fixed the problem. I would stipulate, I'm after looking at the violations and seeing who is truly impacted by nitrates, I'm outraged too. I'm outraged that we're not holding more people more accountable for only a $150,000 fine when this problem was going on for over 5 years and it went unreported. I ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 117.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate my good colleague bringing up some of the facts, and I emphasize some of the facts from the Burlington case, but this isn't about Burlington. I appreciate him reading from the report that I couldn't get my hands on from CDPHE, interestingly enough. But let me, if there is truly an issue, let me talk a little bit more about actually what did happen. Because what he shared with you was CDPHE's line in defense of issuing a $1 million fine to bring Burlington to its knees so they had no other choice. Burlington indeed knew they had water quality issues from their testing, and they were doing things years before that thinking they were doing it right. They had hired a couple of engineers to help with this problem and continued with this, trying to solve the problem by seeking wells outside of the city limits and doing testing on somebody else's wells to see if they can buy that water. Understand that CDPHE, when they found out that that well tested high in nitrates and they weren't going to buy that well, CDPHE fined them for not reporting someone else's well that they had interest in but chose not to use. That's one of the examples. Then as they figured out that they were struggling with this and the engineers were not being able to help them, they decided to go to CDPHE and say, look, we don't know what to do. The engineers haven't been able to help us. And when the engineer's contract got terminated, they went to CDPHE and says, you need to go after these folks. They're doing it wrong. They don't know they're doing it wrong, but you can get after them for doing it wrong. And that's what CDPHE did. All these years you've been doing it wrong, Burlington. I know you've been trying to help your citizens. You've been doing what you can, but it's wrong. You're not following our guidelines. So here it is. $1 million. You owe us $1 million. We're going to hammer you for $1 million to bring you to your knees. But the truth is, this isn't about that one incident. This is about a whole slew of incidents. This is about other agencies that bring fines just to justify their existence. I used to serve on a board of directors of an insurance company. When I was on that board, there was a line item for $500,000. And it had some sort of touchy-feely line item in the budgets. And I said, what is this for? He says, that's what we set aside every year to satisfy the Department of Insurance, who comes in here and audits us to find everything they possibly can that may have nothing to do with business and may have nothing to do with customer satisfaction, but every T is not crossed and every I is not dotted. We typically get fined $3-4 million a year. And this is the line that we set aside hoping to settle with to make them happy and we can move forward. As it turns out, after talking with other insurance companies, they do the same thing. They just figure that this fine is a cost of doing business. A fine that you and I have to pay through our premiums. A fine that you and I have to continue to negotiate somehow through higher costs. Is that what we're here for in government? You know, we talked about the fiscal note, the $40 million, and putting us out of budget. Are we truly going to stand here and say that we want to balance the budget on $40 million worth of fines? Is that what we're saying government's here for? We're going to be out of budget because we quit fining people and instead are trying to help them meet those statutes that we put in place. No, we're putting statutes in place so we can fine you more so we can balance our budget. Surely that's not the message we want to send. You know, this is utilizing that type of scenario is like small little border towns that we've all gone through that look for out-of-state plates. When you drive through, you may be 3-4 miles an hour over the speed limit, and they stop you and write you a ticket. And knowing you can't come back to court, you pay the fine and move on. The unfortunate part about that is we're doing that to the citizens of Colorado, the people we're here to serve. That's why I ask you for a yes vote on 117, and let's quit balancing the budget on the backs of citizens who are trying to comply with statute. Let's do what we can to be helpful as a government to make everybody safer.
Senator Marble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to tell you a little story. Again, this is from my bail days, and I have many of these stories to tell since DORA regulates the bail industry. There is an agent who was fined $252,000 for an infraction that originated by a municipal court judge who had not been in compliance with law since 1987. This agent was brought before an administrative law judge, but it didn't happen right away. There was 10 months of preparation at a cost of $16,000 to the bail agent to go through a process with the ALJ. The Department of Regulatory Agencies was there at the court process, at the hearing, as was the Attorney General. During the 10 months waiting to go to that hearing, the agent was given multiple reports and sheets to fill out, saying about what happened, what was this, what was that. You know the story. Every court has their paperwork. But when Dora was asked by the defendant to fill out the same paperwork, which was going to be discovery, the Department of Regulatory Agencies responded by, "The defendant is harassing us. They are acting maliciously. We have no need to comply with this request." Yet if the bail agent hadn't complied with the request, I'm sure it would have been a much different outcome. After a day's hearing, the administrative law judge looked at Dora and looked at the Attorney General's attorney and said, "Why do you have this agent here?" $252,000, and they wouldn't even disclose how they came up with that fine. They did say, though, that if they did release the information on how they came up with that fine, it would jeopardize the outcomes possibly of other cases that were pending for virtually the same thing. The administrative law judge was right. If that law judge had not seen that the municipal court judge was in error and had never been in compliance with state law since 1987, that municipal court judge would never have any reason to change the way that it administered its court process to defendants who probably were going through there and being adjudicated errantly. There's a lot of problems. Dora acted maliciously and with intent to harass the agent. Nobody was harassing Dora. $252,000, that agent would have lost the home, everything, their business, and this was as something that was not the agent's fault. $16,000 is a lot of money to pay when you're an innocent person. $16,000 and 10 months of work, an investigation to find out what was really going on in this municipal court. Every case is individual, and there are a lot of individuals who are being hurt unnecessarily by the overreach of regulatory agencies who do use these fines to give credit and to justify their existence. They don't care who they hurt. It's all about numbers. I'm very proud that people will stand up if they have the money in court to call these regulatory agencies out. But believe me, the damage that they cause is irreparable. These individuals should never have to be called into court to justify a regulatory agency's existence. The people by these regulatory agencies, just the mere fact that a regulatory agency exists, they are saying to the people, we don't trust you. And you are guilty just by the mere fact that you have a license to do this work, and we will find something. If you don't dot an I or cross a T, you're going to get fined. And believe me, we do get fined. I wish everyone had the money to fight these cases, but they don't, and they roll over, and they'll plead to something else and get the fine lowered, but they pay the fine. So there is a great necessity to pass a Senate bill that will do something to hold them in check, and I am a yes for 117.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am very supportive of this bill, and I can attest to everything that the senator from Sterling is saying is accurate, but you'd have to be a rural legislator to understand what he's talking about. I realize that the fine in Burlington was $1 million and it was reduced down to a certain amount, but that's what we do as state senators. We go in and fight for our communities. And I get involved time and time again in the same situation. And I know a lot of you have traveled Europe, so I'm going to tell you this. You know, it's important for us as Americans to rely on safe drinking water, and that's what we need to do. That's what you do not get in some of your foreign lands. So I'm very supportive of clean drinking water, but the problems are far exceeding that. We have a situation in Custer County. We also get into the garbage dumps. CDHP fined Custer County $30,000 for not turning in the report on a well that they had sunk at a closed dump that had been not abandoned, but it had been closed, but they have to do water testing. They were fined $30,000 for not turning in the report on this particular well. The problem is they sunk the well to CDHPE's specifications, and then the water level dropped, so there's nothing to test in a dry hole. But they were fined $30,000 for this. CDHPE is out of control on this particular issue. You know, time and time again, we have, Baca County was fined for not putting 6 inches of dirt on their garbage refuse. Well, what we're talking about is a few people use it on a daily basis. You cannot expect them to pull in several $100,000 equipment and put dirt on down every day when it's impractical. Our water levels are different throughout the state. So, you know, I'm very supportive of this because I do believe this is about control. And I do believe that, you know, if somebody thinks it's going to take $40 million out of the budget, they're mistaken. That's $40 million of fines that was imposed on people on a regulation that not at all times is functional. And, you know, and I believe that I can speak for the senator from Sterling. We both want clean drinking water, but there are limitations on the controls in which are being placed that is not practical for the people of the state of Colorado. And, you know, I'm very supportive of this, and I like the bill. Thank you.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm hearing this devolve into is the government shouldn't do anything and the government shouldn't put fines. And if I recall, when we had a budget discussion just a week or so ago, we asked the government to help bail out an industry that would have had a devastating effect on the community. And so I think we need to be careful with our rhetoric here. And when we think about what our duties are as surgeons, sorry, I'm a doctor today, as senators, you know, one of our duties, again, is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our population. And it's clear from the information reviewed here that since 2009, the city of Burlington has not done that. They've not been able to protect the health, safety, and welfare of infants and pregnant women. And until these fines were arisen, I don't know that public notice was given. I'm told by people who drive through Burlington and stop at the McDonald's there that there's now a sign on the bathroom door saying, "Water not potable. Don't let your children drink this water." And even if the city did not have the resources to fix the problem, that might have been something they could have brought to us as a state to help them with, because it is one of our duties as a state to do that. And I think what we're discussing here is the example of somebody breaking the law and then coming to us to ask us to not make them pay the fine for that. Separate from that, and more importantly, we're discussing the issue of children being exposed to low oxygen transportation in their brain because of an excess of nitrates in their water. These are our little infant baby children, and these can be lifelong effects on their neurodevelopment. And we're going to turn a blind eye toward it, and we're going to say, oh, I guess it was okay that you couldn't do anything about that for 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it was. I don't think that's the appropriate response. I think that there are probably good examples of ways in which fines, I shouldn't say that, I won't make that assumption. There may be examples of ways in which fines are not appropriate. There is a legal process for dealing with that. But to just go through with a hatchet and say, let's get rid of all fines, I mean, why don't we just say, let's stop regulating water quality? Let's stop regulating air quality. Let's stop making sure that food is not contaminated before it's being sold to the people. There's no reason that we as the government should come in and hold anyone accountable. And then we can be more like some of those countries with real low tax levels like Zambia or Zimbabwe. I'd urge a no vote on Senate Bill 117.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of Senate Bill 117 and thank the sponsor from Sterling for bringing you another good bill and making a great point. If this bill becomes law, a department division within state executive branch would not be able to fine the boss, the people of Colorado, a person, a company, more than $1,000 unless they mail notification and give that person, that entity, 30 days to correct the problem. This isn't about law enforcement. This is about not keeping the rules right, not obeying the rules in the executive branch. And I appreciate the sponsor bringing this bill because I think it responds to an issue that we as legislators have to be keenly aware of with only 15 days left in the session. At or before midnight, May 11th, we will adjourn and we will go home, and our constituents will begin to call with all manner of issues with the state government. 99.9% of that time, it's an issue with something in the executive branch because that's where the majority of government exists. And then we are put in the place of having to explain to constituents that those people at Division X or Department Y, they don't report to us. We can't hire them, we can't fire them, we can't tell them how to enforce the rules because we have the separation of powers. They do listen to us, but it's our request, our appeal to them to back off. It's important for us to be thoughtful about this bill because once we walk out of here, that third branch of government, the legislative branch, our power goes back into a lockbox for safekeeping until next January. And as far as our ability to make law and the sausage-making process here in the Capitol, that's probably a good thing. But it is also a weakness for us to attend to constituent issues. When constituents run into an issue with a division or a department, like being fined into compliance, that heavy hand of government can be addressed with Senate Bill 117 when we're not here. And I appreciate the sponsor in bringing the bill, because when a constituent finds that a department or division is attempting to force compliance through fines because they haven't followed the rules right in the opinion of that bureaucrat in the executive branch, there's virtually nothing we can do other than pick up the phone and ask them to please be thoughtful and attentive. Senate Bill 117 puts some of that power back in a box. It constrains, it controls that. It doesn't eliminate their ability to fine. It just says you have to give notice in 30 days for that individual, that company, to follow the rules right, to comply, and thereby avoid these unnecessary and in some cases extreme fines. Again, I appreciate the sponsor bringing the bill and ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 117.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, we've heard a lot up here at the mic today regarding the regulatory burden. We heard that if we pass Senate Bill 117, we're in danger of becoming a third world country. I found that kind of interesting. What we're in danger of here is actually allowing the people to dictate their lives without over-regulating government burden. This does not eliminate regulation. I think this is a false dichotomy that's been projected here today. This does not eliminate regulation. If the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment felt that there was a need, and there was critical need, and the health of those people in that city were at risk, they have other alternatives. But policing for profit should never be an alternative that the state of Colorado utilizes. But let's get back to the bill. If you go to the revised fiscal note, it says, the bill caps fines. The bill, specifically the bill prohibits any state agency from imposing a fine of $1,000 or more, or in total for related violations, unless the agency mails written notice of the violation of the law or rule, and the offender fails to correct the violation on or before the 30th calendar day after mailing of the written notice. I don't see any elimination of regulation there. I see some common sense here that allows people to be able to relate to the problem and to fix it. Oh my gosh, this is no different than if you're going down the street and you get pulled over by a policeman. The policeman has the opportunity to say, hey, you know, you're going a little fast. You know, but we're going to give you a warning ticket. Or the policeman can say, yeah, here's your fine. Tough have a good day, pay up. What kind of state do we want to be? And then even the policeman in this case, Colorado Department of Public Health, can issue the fine. They can do more if they feel there's a critical need that needs to be impacted immediately. Apparently they decide not to. They just would rather fine, and fine into compliance, as my good colleague from Sterling stated. But the bill caps these fines as follows. For an individual, 10% of the taxable income reported on his or last state income tax. For a business, 10% of the operating revenue reported on its income statement for the last fiscal year. And for a political subdivision of the state, the people of that community who have to pay 5% of its tax revenue for the last fiscal year. They can find more. Well, actually, they can't find more. The idea here is that this is practical. This is what people could afford to pay. Are we a government that's saying we want to put people out of business? Are we a government that's saying we want to chase businesses and private individuals into those third world countries that surround us, like Kansas, Nebraska, Utah, Texas, Oklahoma? I think those countries are doing pretty well. And if you look at the growth rate of those states, they're not third world countries. Let's get out of this false dichotomy of all or none. This is practicality. I urge you vote aye on 117.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there are 2 points worth adding to this conversation. One is a specific point on the Burlington question, and 2 is I think the more general applicability of this bill that folks have not discussed yet. The language in here is quite remarkable. The specifics, I think the issue was raised by the sponsor. What you want to do in these situations is you want to take a role in actually helping to solve the problem. And you probably should put some state resources against that, and you probably should put some incentives in for that local entity to also help solve the problem. Let's talk about that. What is the state doing to help address the 21,000 violations of water safety in Burlington? They've committed $4.4 million of state resources to help remediate that problem. $4.4 million. What are they doing to incentivize Burlington to solve it themselves? They're cutting the allocated fine by 90% of the fee if they actually dedicate the time and energy to fixing the problem. $150,000. So when this is over, the state tab will be 40 times the local tab for what it costs to remediate 2,100 violations that local actors decided. I'd say that's a pretty good effort to try to solve the actual problem. But here's an actual problem this bill does not solve. Despite the fact, as the sponsor said, that this won't change anything in Burlington because that's an ex post facto to this legislation, what will this bill do? Look at the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3. This bill says, remarkably, no state agency shall impose a fine unless they have 20 business days, so that's 28 days with weekends to fix it. What does that mean? No agency shall impose a fine. So, Marijuana Enforcement Division. If you have a marijuana shop in the state that is selling marijuana infested with rat poison, and they're selling it to 15-year-olds, you can do that under this bill for 28 more days. And if after 28 days you haven't fixed it, then maybe we'll come talk to you. You could have Chipotle. You could have an international corporation with salmonella in the pork in a Colorado business. You know what? Go ahead and use out the rest of the supply you have, because under this bill, you can sell that pork in Colorado for 28 more days. Simple thing. You're bringing in a truck that is 1,000 pounds over the truck limit. You can actually keep driving that truck through the state for 28 more days. Unless you drive pretty slowly, you should be able to get through and onto your spot before we catch you in 28 days. You want a Gold King mine or a Suncor spill into the Platte River? Any open source violation, you can dump an entire oil well into a river in Colorado, but don't worry, you can keep doing it for 28 more days until any arm of state government would be empowered to respond under this legislation. I can't imagine that that's our goal, but that will be the effect of passing Senate Bill 117. So I would ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 117? Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to make a couple last final points on this one. We heard here a few minutes ago, quote, "You have to be a rural legislator to understand this issue." I take exception to that because the constituents in my district that live in Lakewood, that live in Jefferson County, in fact, I would say the constituents in every one of our districts want to be able to drink clean water, turn on the tap, and clean water come out. The people in my district, to stay healthy, need to have clean water. And we have that expectation. The people in my district need to breathe clean air. And they have that expectation of me to make sure that we have policies in place to make sure that we have clean air and water. That the food sold in our stores is healthy and edible and won't make them sick. Let's ask the people of Flint, Michigan, which I don't believe is a rural part of Michigan. Let's ask the people of Flint, Michigan, if this is an issue that they're concerned about. Because I may not be a rural legislator, but the 145,000 people who live in my district don't want to live in Flint, Michigan. They don't want water coming out of the tap like it is coming out in Flint, Michigan. So third world countries were brought up. So let's talk to somebody who's lived in a third world country and has dealt with water quality in third world countries. So I've lived in third world countries. I've lived in third world countries for 3 years growing up. And the very first thing that we learned when my family moved to Indonesia is that you did not drink the water. When you turn on the tap, and they had running water there, but you turn on the tap, you put your pot under the tap, you fill up the pot, you turn on the stove, and you boil that water. And you boil it, I don't remember exactly how long, it was like 3 or 4 minutes. It had to be at a full boil to make sure that that water was potable, that you could actually drink it at that point. Same thing when I lived in Sudan. You could turn on the water would come out the spigot, you didn't drink it. You had to boil it before you drank it. So we pass Senate Bill 117, and then we tell our constituents, just boil your water. Because the state of Colorado isn't going to enforce water quality anymore. That will solve the problem, right? Actually, it doesn't solve the problem for the pregnant women and infants in Burlington. That is because boiling your water does not get rid of nitrates. In fact, it makes the nitrate level even higher once you boil the water. So you cannot even boil the water to get rid of the nitrate. So it doesn't solve the water quality problem in Burlington, or in my district, or in anyone's district. That's what it's like living in a third world country. That's what it's like living somewhere where you can turn on the tap, but you can't actually drink the water. Those are the kinds of services we're talking about. And just one last thing. We keep hearing here about the $1 million fine. again, if the city of Burlington, which is kind of funny since it was brought up as the example, but then was talked about as, well, this isn't about Burlington, but it was brought up originally and it kept being, but if the city of Burlington takes the $4.4 million in state grants to fix the problem, they have a $150,000 cash grant, or cash fine that they have to pay. The state will put in the $4.4 million to help them fix their problem. Please vote no on Senate Bill 117.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. You know, when I say that you need to look at this problem through the eyes of a rural legislator, until you have the number memorized on a daily basis on CDHPE, until you know exactly who to deal with and how to deal with them, you'll never understand what I'm saying. I would submit that any Metro legislator would never even have to deal with this. But you get in the rural Colorado and you deal with this on a daily basis. This overhanding of CDHPE is way overboard. So I do stand by my remarks on a rural legislator because we're the ones that deal with it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in closing, I'll just offer a couple of brief comments. We did talk about Burlington as an example. We also talked about insurance companies. We talked about bail bondsmen, but we only focus, I guess, on the Burlington side over here. To make the assumption that we start every discussion with the people of Colorado are being crooks, that we will dump water down wells and we will contaminate at any opportunity is absolutely unreasonable. To assume the people of Colorado will destroy every opportunity they can if there's no fines is unreasonable. We talked about children and pregnant mothers being affected by nitrates and water quality. Fines do not help those children. Fines do not clean up that water. That's why in this bill we are assuming the people of Colorado are trustworthy. Our constituents are trustworthy. They want to solve the problem. What this bill does is says, we're going to help you solve the problem. We're going to give you some days to solve the problem and actually make the water better rather than negotiate for 6 months or 8 months on what that fine should be and what it should look like and allow those people to continue down that same path. Huge fines don't help. Help me stop, as my good senator from Jefferson County say, policing for profit, because that's what we're doing. Flint, Michigan is a prime example. Will a fine help Flint, Michigan? The answer is no. But putting resources to help solve that problem is the answer, not fines. Ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 117? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 117. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. Ayes have it, and Senate Bill 117 is adopted. Mr. Majors. Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the remainder of the second reading calendar be laid over until tomorrow.
The motion before the body is to lay over the balance of the second reading calendar to April 21st. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the balance of the calendar will be laid over. Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we rise and report.
Motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee has met and had several bills under consideration. Mr. Majors, would you please read the report?
April 20th, 2016, Mr. President, Committee opening reports that in consideration of the following tax bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendations drawn. Senate Bill 40 is amended, Senate Bill 130 is amended, Senate Bill 117 is amended, passed on second reading in order to gross place of the counter for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 162, 183, 178, 5, 97, 86, 2, and 154, and House Bill 1101 laid over until April 21st, 2016, retaining its place on the calendar, and Senate Bill 150 laid over until April 25th, 2016, retaining its place on the calendar.
Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
You've heard the motion. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Senate Bill 40 as amended, Senate Bill 130 as amended, Senate Bill 117 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 162, Senate Bill 183, Senate Bill 178, Senate Bill 5, Senate Bill 97, Senate Bill 86, Senate Bill 2, Senate Bill 154, House Bill 1101 laid over until April 21st and retaining their place on the calendar. Senate Bill 150 laid over until April 25th and retaining its place on the calendar. Committee reports.
April 19, 2016, Committee on Judiciary, after consideration of the Mayor's Committee, recommends the following House Bill 1129 be amended as follows, and also amended before the Committee on Appropriations with a favorable recommendation.
Message from the House.
April 20, 2016, Mr. President, the House has passed the third reading and transmitted the Federal Statutes, House Bill 1363, House Bill 1313 is amended, and House Bill 1273 is amended.
Message from the Reviser.
April 20, 2016, we hear the transmit without comment as amended, House Bills 1313 and 1273, with comment as amended, House Bill 1363.
Introduction of bills.
House Bill 1279 by Representative Rosenthal, Senator Newell, concerning the creation of an international sister state relationship program by the Colorado Office of Economic Development.
House Bill 1279 is assigned to the Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs.
House Bill 1401 by Representatives Becker, Kay, and Priola, Senators Woods and Hodge, concerning the regulation of retail foods establishment.
House Bill 1401 is assigned to the Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology. Consideration of resolutions. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1018?
House Joint Resolution 1018 by Representatives Asgar and Vehil and Senator Garcia concerning the support for goods produced in Colorado and other states of the United States.
Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that House Joint Resolution 1018 be laid over till April 21st.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1018 will lay over until April 21st. Consideration of House amendments to Senate bills. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 102?
Senate Bill 102 by Senator Kerr and Representative Moreno concerning the elimination of mandatory sentences to incarceration for certain crimes in connection with making and reducing an appropriation.
Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 102 be laid over till tomorrow, April 21st.
The motion is to lay over consideration of House amendments to Senate Bill 102 until April 21st. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The consideration of House amendments to Senate Bill 102 will lay over until April 21st. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 131?
Senate Bill 131 by Senator Tate and Representatives Pabon and Willett concerning the management of assets for individuals in connection with clarifying that a fiduciary's authority to suspend after a fiduciary receives notice that a petition for the fiduciary's removal has been filed, protecting an adult ward or protecting person's right to an attorney post-adjudication and preventing a fiduciary from paying court costs or fees from out of an estate after receiving notice of an action for the fiduciary's removal.
Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 131.
Is there further discussion? Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. The House removed an amendment we put on the bill in committee. It was discovered through further scrutiny in the House that the amendment didn't use the best terminology and created a conflict with other area of statutes. So it was eliminated in the House and the bill passed unanimously.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 131. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, the Senate concurs with House amendments to Senate Bill 131. Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for re-adoption of Senate Bill 131.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the re-adoption of Senate Bill 131. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Bill 131 is re-adopted. Co-sponsors. Senator Stedman. Consideration of House adherence. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1183?
House Bill 1183 by Representative Buckner and Senator Crowder concerning allowing changes made to the Federal Child Care and Development Block Grant reauthorization in 2014, the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program.
Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the House Bill 1183 be laid over until tomorrow, April 21st.
The motion is to lay over the consideration of House adherence to House Bill 1183 until April 21st. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1183 will lay over until April 21st. Consideration of governor's appointments. Mr. Majors. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the consideration of governor's appointments be laid over until tomorrow, April 21st.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The consideration of governor's appointments will lay over until April 21st. Announcements. I have an announcement that Senator Newell does not have an announcement. Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to let you know that Senator Newell does not have an announcement. I also wanted to announce, and I think I'm allowed to do this because we all got this email, that tomorrow at 8 a.m., the Colorado Health Institute is hosting a breakfast called Coffee and Colorado Care, and it will be your opportunity to learn about Amendment 69 and ask questions of the Colorado Health Institute.
Further announcements? Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, on your desk, there is a announcement for the Colorado Sportsman's Day at the Capitol. It's the hot dog day. They're going to, if weather permitting, it will be out on the east lawn tomorrow, noon to 3. So, I'd like to have you come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further announcements? Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a good companion opportunity to the previously mentioned event, the Claw Caucus is meeting as well tomorrow at noon. It's always very interesting. Encourage your checking in. Thank you. It's over at LSBA.
Further announcements? Colleagues, I'm going to ask that we would stand together and take a moment and remember and reflect on the 17th anniversary of our loss at Columbine. And that we would join together in a moment of silence, and that we would ring our chimes out of respect and remembrance. Thank you, colleagues. Assistant Majority Leader Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, announcements concerning committee meetings. They will be meeting as scheduled with the following modifications. And that is that Senate Judiciary Committee will be meeting in room 271. And the order of the bills will be reversed. It will be Senate Bill 181 first, and then Senate Bill 180. And then in Senate State Veterans and Military Affairs, Senate Bill 189 will be heard first. The rest of the order will be followed, and all other committees will be as scheduled.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, be aware, I'm sure you're quite well aware, that there were many bills on second reading that were not heard. We are in perilously close to late night sessions, so please bear that in mind. And not today, but maybe tomorrow. In any event, I move that the Senate recess until 1 o'clock for the purpose of reading bills across the desk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will stand in recess until 1 p.m.